So I'm going to start with some overall trends that we are seeing in corporate sustainability. And this comes from 4 years of doing the rankings of India's most sustainable companies. We started the research 4 years ago, and this is the 3rd year of publishing. It takes a year to collect data. So that's why 4 years. It takes a year to collect data. The whole team does that for the whole year. And the last year, I just wanted to share with you some trends that we're seeing. So the first bit is that sustainability is now being formalized within the org structure of companies. We're seeing this coming across very strongly. In 2014, when I was the Chief Sustainability Officer of Jindal Steel and Power, it was me and there was one more CSO of the Tata Group. There were 2 CSOs in India, and we've come a long way from that. And I remember that his office was also in CP of all the places, and we used to have monthly catch-ups to discuss that how is he doing things and how am I doing things, because the concept of CSOs was so new. And we were kind of shaping and figuring out how does a CSO go about doing things. But I think we've come such a long way, and it's been fascinating to see that now large number of companies, especially in the year 2022, have appointed CSOs. They have sustainability departments, which still looks there are different ways of sustainability departments. We don't see a single pattern. There are different departments which report into the sustainability department. Sometimes CSR is part of it. Sometimes CSR is not part of it. Sometimes strategy is part of it. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes R&D is part of it or not. Maybe in a few years that's going to consolidate, or maybe it will never. Maybe every sector will have its own way of doing this. But what's also happening is that because it's being formalized, we're seeing that there are policies that are being put in place. There are processes and systems that are being put in place. A big drive for that is also the focus on disclosures and reporting, because there is a large amount of data which needs to be collected. And so there have to be systems and protocols to put in place. So this is one big trend. The second is we're seeing that sustainability is being embedded inside business models. 4 years ago, we used to be speaking to companies about this as a best practice. And in year 2022, we were amazed to see examples of this coming up in ways which were much bigger than we could have imagined. Schneider, Tech Mahindra, they've started business sustainability consulting divisions, a new business altogether on sustainability. There is a lot of circularity and waste to wealth, which is creating new businesses altogether. The cement industry is an amazing turnaround story. I mean, that is really something to reckon with. You would have seen there were a couple of, not too many, but a few cement companies also which were ranked in the top 50. So that's an industry which is now being built. That's an industry which is on 2 sides of the spectrum. On one side, you have cement companies which are converting waste into cement and mainstreaming that. And on the other hand, you have cement companies which is business as usual and which have typically a very large carbon footprint. But creating your product from waste is essentially embedding sustainability in your business model. It is not a nice to have, you're doing your business, you're running your show, you're creating your products and services, and on the side, you're doing a little bit of circularity. The session on circularity was fascinating, by the way. It was very, very good. But what we're seeing is that all that now, we're seeing a few examples where it's being embedded in the main business model. The third is that there is continued increase in transparency. This year, we've crossed the 50% mark, or 54% of companies have reported, have disclosed their sustainability data in reporting frameworks which are globally accepted. So it's not like a report with pictures and saying whatever you want, but then it's audited documents, audited reports, using a framework, using an internationally accepted framework. There is also this year increased transparency in scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions as well, and I'll come to that later. More companies setting decarbonizing targets. We've had 8 companies, new companies this year in 2022 in the top 200 who have set targets. Yes, it's more, but it's also too less. I mean, 8 companies setting, out of India's largest setting targets. So I hope to see maybe next year when I come back to you with trends and data, I hope that this changes, because when we work with companies, the targets are pulled out of the air often, so we see there are targets on social aspects or environmental aspects, and often it's a 50%, let's increase something by 50%, let's decrease, let's go zero on something. But where have those targets come from? So, you need a scientific method to determine those targets, which is increasing, but not that fast. And then there is an increased focus on sustainability, education, and training. I think this is something which a lot of companies are realizing, that you need to upskill. We don't yet have universities and institutions which are training the youth, the young generation, right out of school on sustainability and climate. You have a few master's programs. We at Sustain Labs, we've created India's first climate-focused university, a BTech degree, engineering degree, but it's still very less. So a very large majority of companies will have to upskill their people. And that has come across very strongly in 2022. Earlier, it was more of, just how do you communicate sustainability? But now we are coming down to training people on more technical aspects. So a little bit, some numbers. So 54% of companies amongst India's largest 200 companies published sustainability reports this year. It's really a landmark, because we've crossed 50%, because last year it was 41.3. So it's a big jump. It's a big jump. So I think, this is really a landmark, and, let's give a little clap and a little applause for corporate India. We've crossed the 50% mark. We've crossed the 50% mark, and I hope this increases at even a greater speed. In FY 2022, like I said, that more number of companies than ever before have measured and disclosed their scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1, as you can see, 45.5% was this year, 2022, whereas 32% was last year. So there's a big jump there. Scope 2 emissions disclosures this year, again, 43.5% and 32%, big jump there as well. Scope 3, difficult. Scope 3 is tough. And Scope 3, this is the first year that, last year was the first year that SEBI made it mandatory for companies, listed companies, 1,000 listed companies to disclose Scope 3. So still there's been a jump, 22.5% and 19%. I wanted to show you this. This is women representation in corporates. So these are the sectors. Can everybody see the sectors? Can you read? Yeah. So these are the sectors. And when we rank companies, we do a sector analysis, because you can't compare Tata Power to, say, Grasim, because the kind of the businesses are different, and therefore the performance on several KPIs will be different. So we do a sector analysis, and these are the sectors that we club all the companies into. This is your 1920 number of women in 1920. This is 2021, and this is 21-22. And I love this, because every year now we're ranking, and we're getting a time series, and we're able to analyze. Anybody who wants to just talk about what they're seeing over here? Any comments on what you see? Maybe the mic can be turned. There is not much change. In some cases, there is a reduction. More comments? You can come up and see if you can't see the numbers properly. Yes? I would love that if the companies have that data. you know how much we've had to work to even get this data. A lot of the companies here would know because that kind of data the companies have, then we can have that, but they don't. No, yeah, that's a point well taken. That is why we do a sector representation, because of course, there are certain sectors like retail, where there will be more women. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Any
Hello.
other comments?
I think I am Anirudh.
Yes.
I'm a professor at JGU.
Yes.
And I think there's a problem with this data. FY 2021 and 21-22, the GDP went down, hiring was frozen. And now the hiring is taking place. So what you're seeing, the trend is an anomaly.
No,
So you
it's
cannot,
not.
no, it is. There are multiple studies being published. So you need to wait for 22,
Can I just interrupt you?
22, 23 data.
No, 1 second. Before making such sweeping statements, please correct yourself, because this data has been collected from the companies themselves. We've sent them the sheets back. So please don't make such sweeping statements that this is wrong.
No, I mean, I know the data. And the data is right, but there is a trend that you haven't captured, which is COVID.
Thank you.
And because of that, you don't see a delta changes in this data of 3 years. But in 22, 23, you would see the changes.
I think before making such statements, you should just look, just think through this properly. And the data that we collect, by the way, we speak to companies, we only take it from audited documents, and the companies here would tell you that we actually send the sheets back to correct and, bring it back to us. Any other trends that you see? One more? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So there's one big trend over here that nobody is reaching even 40%. There are no sectors which have even 40%. So there's 34% in IT, in information technology. And then you have the pharma sector, which is rising. There is the retail industry, which again, is quite, it's got 25% women. But then if you go into women in leadership and what roles are women in, that is something that we don't have granular data like this. And there is, no way of triangulating that data and checking with the companies. But then what we do have is this, that looking at women board members to give some sense of women in leadership as well. Yeah. So this, So this gives you a sense of the number of women. So no one's crossing a 40%, not even a 25%. And this gives you a sense of women board members. So here, what do you see? Maybe just one comment. Yes.
I think trend in women leadership, especially the board level of executive companies, as compared to the middle management, which indeed is very stagnant.
Yes. No, these are great. Both are great comments. Yeah, so somewhere I think women, it's static over the 3 years mostly. And over here, it is kind of growing. But then here again, you see no one's crossing the 25% mark. No one's crossing the 25% mark. So I want to move to the next piece where why I'm showing you this is because what I'm going to talk about is the changing role of CSOs. And we are working across several geographies. And we build ventures. So there's no conflict of interest. We are not a consulting company. So when we rank companies, we're not looking at consulting, there's no conflict of interest. But because of the work we do and the various clients that we have, we do have an insight into the changing role of hundreds of CSOs and sustainability practitioners from around the world. And based on that, I wanted to share with you something very interesting that we are seeing, the shifting role of CSOs. I started this talk about, when I was a CSO, I was one of the two, in the country. And now in 2023, a few trends that we see. From PR to CSR, in early days, it used to be communications. it's still probably communications is a part of it. But increasingly, it's moving towards strategy. The global sustainability head of Accenture, Peter Lacey, is also the global head for strategy. And we see this happening several times. So it's moved dramatically from PR and CSR to strategy. And in a lot of companies, the sustainability head would also be leading the communications department as well. And now that's been split because they see that within sustainability itself, there's a lot more, and communications is being given to communications. So this is one major, major trend. Anybody who relates to this? Yes. Anybody wants to speak about anything?
Shouldn't this be going hand in hand?
And
Both sustainability as well as communication.
I completely agree with you. It's a great point. CSR and PR is growing and communications is growing at its own pace. But here the point I'm making is that the person, CSO, the Chief Sustainability Officer, what we're seeing, and for good or for bad or for whatever, what we're seeing is that their responsibilities used to be this. Earlier, CSO means CSR. Like even when I used to say I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer, they used to say, what are the CSR initiatives you are doing? It used to be literally that. And then it became a lot of PR and communications. The responsibility of the CSO is moved towards strategy. And in a lot of cases, like I said, the CSO is the CSO, like strategy and sustainability. And in some places, strategy is a part of the larger thing that they're doing. Yeah. Very. Anybody else? Yes.
The biggest example is of our finance minister. Biggest example of this, the strategy, is the finance minister.
Explain.
Sitaraman.
Explain.
She's making a strategy how to run the country.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
You want me to say?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please, please.
So I'm earlier in my career, I was into operations and then strategy, and then moved into a CSO role right now. Yes, I fully concur. A few years back, when I was with Ultratech Cement, I was CSO. I was given the responsibility of sustainability along with my technology support responsibility. That time, I used to see is communication is the most of the important thing
Yes.
for the CSO, what the company is doing, and
Yes.
etc. etc.
Absolutely.
From there, it's moved to coming up with certain policies and
you go.
CSO strategy.
Great example. And I'm sure there are many in this room. It's moved.
Can I add on?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Vachna. I work for Akshakalpa Organic. It's an organic dairy brand based in the South. So when in the organic industry, really, sustainability is really at the heart of everything that we do, because soil has to be organic, everything that we do. So our farms are like closed loop farms, so even at the front end, we're thinking about it. So for us, sustainability is really top down. It's more than it being about communication. It's actually coming from the CEO. So sustainability is really at that level for an organization which is in the organic field. So I completely
Great.
resonate.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Great. The next trend is this. So from a sustainability department, which used to be sitting on the side, it's now becoming a centralized function of the company. It's becoming a central piece, which actually, again, I go back to those days because those days will never come back when there used to be like just the Tatas who would have a CSO. At that time, they had it centralized. And then, you would know right from the start, the Tata Group, they always had the central. And even for me also, when I was CSO as well, it would be the CEO, CSO, and me literally up. Offices used to be one next to the other. But for many companies, even up till 2 years ago, it used to be the sustainability department. There'd be their business and then the sustainability department. And there used to be like this whole effort from the sustainability department to work the other departments. But what we're moving to now is that it's becoming a centralized function. And a lot of it has to do with this reporting. Because for that reporting, the GRI reports and sustainability report, you need to have data from across all the different departments. And if you want data from all the departments, then you want that data to look good. If you want the data to look good, then you need to tell all the departments what to do better. If you want to tell departments what to do better, then you need to be empowered to tell them what to do better. Right? So one thing has led to the other, but we're seeing this and it is really, really interesting. Yeah. This is a big one. From a cost center. From a cost center, oh, you know, the sustainability department is going to be like the bottleneck for everything. Oh, there's going to be expenses over there. There is business and revenues, and then there is expenses on sustainability. Revenue generator. And any examples on this one? We had a wonderful panel just now on circular economy, and then, you know, where there are business models and it's becoming a revenue generator. But any examples on this one from becoming a cost center to revenue generator? Carbon credits. Amazing. Carbon credits. Any other? Sorry? Yes. So from a cost center to a revenue generator, even like the whole waste to wealth and starting new business departments, especially in the construction industry, for example. Yeah. So the CSO story, you know, in FY21, global companies appointed about as many chief sustainability officers in the year as in all prior 8 years combined. And we're, you know, looking, and this has been, this is a study by PwC. Gartner did a similar study where it says the volume of conversations on social media using the term CSO has doubled over in the FY20 and 21. And another study a year before said that nearly 80% of 325 investment professionals reported ESG risks as a major factor in their investment evaluations, which kind of leads to the previous two. So the role of the CSO is now becoming larger, and it is changing and it is evolving as well. So after this, I just want to, for those of you who are practitioners in the field, maybe just some discussion on some practical ways to go about doing all that now you have to go about doing. Shine the spotlight on the agenda. The agenda that a lot of times sustainability can be jargonized and can be made very difficult to understand. Put the spotlight on the sustainability agenda. It's important that the whole company needs to know what the agenda is. Only then they will feel part of it and they will be able to implement. If you make it complicated, if you're hiding it, if you're not internally communicating it, it's very difficult for the rest of the company to actually know what needs to be done. Right? We are moving out of that era where sustainability used to be jargonized. And with all due respect to consultants, but then, you know, sometimes it gets all jargonized and we make very complicated by them. But make it simple, shine the spotlight, and I'll take a comment a bit later. Work your data. And I wanted to show this before, you know, taking the comment, because this is related to shine the spotlight. Speak in data. Once you show the data, you'll be able to make the case in an easier way. Yeah, so work your data, collect data, make a case for you to get through. And this data will also help you, you know, in many, many other ways as well, of improving the company, of benchmarking yourselves, being scientific in your targets, reporting as well, and many, many other things. Yeah, you had a comment. Yes.
Hello, madam, I am technology expert. The question is, you are not told us, you know, about the GDP of sustainability GDP. How much companies are spending on sustainability and how much is the outcome? Yeah. For example, how much water they are saving, all the, you know, companies.
Thank you. I'll address that. So this is a masterclass for CSOs.
Okay.
So this is not on that, but it's a very important point. That's going to be there in the magazine as well as in the report that we put in also, the CSR percentage spent for all the companies. Yeah. Okay. Learn deeply and provide solutions. this first part, learn deeply. We just had a comment where somebody moved from operations. Most of the CSOs, Niti, you're from the legal background, right? Most CSOs, and our generation, me, myself, I was an investment banker. We've all moved from certain other professions and we've learned by ourselves. This generation of sustainability decision makers are self-learning. And we cannot be taking decisions without rigorously self-learning. You cannot do it. You can delegate, but you cannot be delegating without knowing even better than your team members what it is that you're asking them to do. We don't have universities and institutions to have taught us what we're doing. And even if they did, it would have been outdated because this field is changing so fast. In our climate university, we have a problem. The curriculum keeps changing. So every year we're revising the curriculum because it keeps changing. So learning deeply, spending the time to learn, to get into the thick of things, it is, not just a management thing. Get into the technicalities, keep abreast, find your own ways, have maybe somebody whose job is to just tell you and explain to you in simple words what's going on, because you won't be able to pick up on the reading material. So have a system there. But you can't get away with learning deeply, because either then you'll be making wrong decisions or people will stop trusting you because you won't know. So learning deeply is extremely important. Maybe the next generation, it'll be easier. And then provide solutions. And that, we've come a long way where this used to be the problem child, but then, emissions. Okay, but then this. Now there are solutions. Now there are technologies. There are solutions. It's about learning about it, understanding what is the best way forward. But I must also tell you that because we have a bit of a comparative thing, a lot of the technology solutions, at least, they work for other parts of the world which need to be adapted to different regions as well. That's not happened. So, so in terms of solutions. Give the bad news too. Give the bad news too. And this is so tricky, especially in an hierarchy, because giving the bad news. Anybody who wants to comment on this, any of the sustainability practitioners? I know for those of you who are not CSOs, who are not sustainability practitioners, this might be a little bit irrelevant, but yes.
Bad news is good news.
Bad news is good news. Yes, bad news is good news because somebody gave that news and saved a lot of trouble, right? Any other practical, yes.
So ma'am, actually, when we are talking about the sustainability, then we can see that mostly CSO is related to the S part and G part. But the E part is very important for the sustainability because we want to become net zero and the carbon. So if the person become more knowledge about the E part, because if we say mostly company covering S and G,
yes,
but the CSO is not coming from the E background.
Okay, I'll
so
just
E is some technical
that.
expertise.
Nowadays I know E, S, and G is a big this thing. Now also climate also is a big buzzword. But frankly, every company will have its own definition of sustainability. It's beyond. It's not always E, S, and G also, and it's not always people, planet, and profits also. Every organization will have its own. For some people, it would be risk management. For some, it would be R&D. So ESG is a buzzword these days. 20 years ago, 1798, when people started talking about sustainability, can somebody tell me what was it about? When we first started talking about sustainability in more? Okay, sustainable business. Somebody answered the right answer. Food. It was food. Thomas Malthus, 1798, he talked about the famous Malthusian dilemma. He talked about that was the beginning of this, where he said that the human population is increasing in an in a geometric order, because 2 producing 2, 3, 4 at that time. But then food is increasing in an arithmetic order. So the resources, he defined resources not as water or climate, or that. It was food. So nowadays it's ESG and climate and all of that. But then 20 years ago also it wasn't that. Yeah. So we have to keep a larger picture of what is sustainability. It's basically being responsible. it's about being responsible and thinking about the future, making sure everything is sufficient. We are not just going boom, 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 and then bust, but thinking about the larger picture, making sure, we're in it for the long run. Yeah. Okay. Give the bad news to you get it, right? So yes, there is good news, but it's very tough. I mean, it's easy to say that and easy, but then actually, how do you communicate the bad news? Because sometimes it'll be your fault or somebody else's fault and all of that, and being solutions oriented, this is very tough to do. Anybody who wants to interpret this? Be the bridge. Yes.
CSO has to be a facilitator.
Huh.
I think that is very important, because going back and putting it in context, when you said that, they need to understand it deeply, they have to provide solutions.
Yes.
So effectively, they'll have to show purpose and they'll have to bridge that gap
Yes.
of understanding.
Yes, very good. And it's partly right also. The two green things, it could be different for different companies, but usually on one side is all the good stuff. It's like do this right and social and, all the good stuff. Like we said, it's I think great comment that's beyond ESG. But then on the other side, it is your CFO. Where's the money going to come from for everything? It's the business, it's the CFO, it's the investments, it's the divestments, how things are done, layoffs, the way it is done, all that part. And it's easy sometimes to be in an opposition, to be opposing. But it's important to understand this person's point of view. It's important to speak the same language as this person's point of view and that person's point of view. This is the toughest part of being a CSO. Because you have to speak the same language, empathize and understand equally this part and this part. Yeah, and this is where I think, companies hiring CSOs, this is something that they are increasingly being mindful of, that who is a person who can speak to the CFO in that language and talking about budgets and this and that, but also understanding and being the right representative and learned representative of all the other stuff as well. Yeah. So the CSO today, a big part of your role is negotiation. And I'm sorry for all of you who are not CSOs or who are, not a sustainability decision maker, but hopefully this is informational for you. But negotiation, it's on a daily basis. I mean, those of you who are here, who are sustainability, decision makers, you would know this. On a daily basis, it is negotiation. Negotiation for doing things differently. Negotiations for budgets, negotiation, because you're trying to create something new. There are new things coming in, which you also don't know. You're learning, telling the rest of the organization to do things better. We touched upon this. Data-driven, data. Maybe 5 years later, it'll be easier. But at this point, who are the data owners? You don't even know in the company, large company, 15,000 people, who's the data owner? Then that data owner getting the data. So, being data-driven, collaborative. And I think collaboration came up again and again in yesterday and today. And collaboration is because you can take the decisions, but ultimately you're not going to be sitting and implementing, because it's the whole company who's going to implement it for you. So collaboration at every step, even when you're making the agenda to rolling out the agenda, even when you're making the agenda, you have to be collaborative. Ask everybody that what is it that you want. Science driven. This needs to be more, but then this is happening. A CSO's job is to be science-driven. There's a lot of, anecdotal evidence in this field. And, but this is actually, sustainability is science, whether it is on the social side or, even on the environment, even on the social side, because science doesn't mean physics and chemistry only. Science means a scientific approach, a scientific thinking. If you're looking at CSR projects even, so not just looking at, head count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are my beneficiaries. Because one CSR project, if you do a scientific evaluation of impact of it, then you would go into the secondary impacts. You'll go into the deeper impacts. An NGO who is training women taxi drivers, they're probably training 25 in a year. But the actual impact, if you look at it scientifically, using scientific methodologies, there you will see there is a deep societal impact, because getting women to do taboo, jobs, non-cliched jobs and stuff. So science-driven in everything that one does. Action-oriented, from philosophizing, just writing op-eds and being a thought leader, that's important. But how are you actionizing that? You've got to convert that into action. Thought leadership, but thought leadership, how do you act? Thought leadership, yes or no? Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's there. But what you can't do away with, what CSOs today cannot do away with, is being action-oriented. What does that translate into? What is the action? Listening. Very, very, very important. We in systems thinking, because if you say like the CSOs, and we talked about this before, you're in the center of the system increasingly. Listening to the rest of the organization. Listening to the needs, listening to risks, listening to who the stakeholders are, right? Good communication, listening is part of communication. So these two are related. Communication is not just speaking, it is also about listening. Clearly articulating things is very, very important. And domain knowledge, which we've already touched upon. Domain knowledge, we have to build. This generation CSOs, we have to self-learn. We have to learn, you find your way, how you want to do it. Every morning you get a clipping or something of things you have to learn. You get up in the morning and you do 4 hours of classes online. You have somebody whose job is to just explain to you things. You have to find your way and build that domain knowledge. No getting away from that. Yeah. And all this, CSOs today, they are actively engaging with the company's external stakeholders. Stakeholders are entities that impact the business and or who are impacted by the business. So entities could be people, it could be organizations, it could be the ecosystem, flora and fauna. And on the other hand, CSOs of today, they're also actively engaging the board, all the internal stakeholders, the board members, the company leadership, all the employees and the shareholders. Right? Does anybody relate to this? Yeah. And the challenges that we see that CSOs are facing today, the top three, number one is keeping pace with the fast changing regulations impacting corporate sustainability, especially driven by the EU. The EU is coming up with some solid regulations, which is impacting trade worldwide. Anybody importing into the, anybody exporting to the EU, they'll have to pay taxes equivalent to the emissions, extra emissions that company is causing, which is more than the European, any company in Europe and so on. So there's a lot of regulations in the finance industry. I mean, people are sitting with that 300-page document. So there's a lot of fast-changing regulations and keeping pace with that. Understanding and implementing technology solutions for decarbonization. So this is, the second one, a lot of CTOs, actually in this room as well. So CTOs, Ambuja, for example, so there are CTOs, which are also CSOs. And in some companies abroad, we're seeing a new title called Chief Decarbonization Officer. There's a CDO that we are seeing, a Chief Decarbonization Officer. So that he's a CTO and a CSO mix. So the second one is increasingly very important. And because like one of you said, climate is becoming very, very important in our era. Yeah. And the third challenge we see is the lack of empowerment within the company, because, it's, if you're not given the place within the company, which is, next to the CEO or the owner, then you're crippled. CSO can't do much then, because everything that you see, all the stuff that they have to do is change making. They have to make certain large changes, and all these changes are something new. And there's also ambiguity, because we don't even know the fuller picture, what will come, things are changing. So in the first panel yesterday, also I talked about the 3 C's, where the second C was cast. So how do you cast sustainability is very, and some of what we've seen even in India the best performing sustainability companies, the sustainability team and the CSO is very empowered. They're like right there. They have the ear to the CEO all the time. They're making. So that's really a defining factor, but that's also a challenge. It doesn't happen always. Yeah. I'm going to end this with just this. The emerging areas of a CSO's role and what we are seeing, how things are emerging. So it is this is how it is. But this is the direction that we are seeing things are moving towards. One is technology. So a lot of because as somebody mentioned that these days, there's a lot of focus on climate in sustainability, and technology is a big solution provider. So the CSO's job is now to understand new technologies, be a practitioner of new technologies, advise on new technologies. That also explains, this last bit as well. The second challenge that where a lot of CTOs are becoming CSOs and so on. So technology is a big field which CSOs are engaging in. The second is business transformation. So a lot of the sectors, ONG, for example, NG, a major French ONG company, they are moving out completely of thermal and then getting into renewables, and in India also we have some fabulous examples, the cement industry, some of the power companies, there is an entire business transformation. IT is a fabulous example, tobacco company, but today 54% of the portfolio is non-tobacco. So business transformation, and these businesses are transforming primarily because of sustainability, because they want to move towards things which is good for stakeholders beyond shareholders. And that business transformation is being led by the CSO. So this was not happening 10 years ago. It was very, this is also very recent, that whole businesses are now moving out of their business. The products are changing. The way the products are designed are changing and all of that. Yeah. Running a new business. So there are new businesses within business conglomerates, within smaller companies and startups as well, new verticals, new products, which are focusing on sustainability, which are catering to customers, maybe, who care for this, or maybe, or they are leveraging circular economy towards creating new products. So running a new business. So CSOs now are also running a new business. And Sandeep Chandna, I don't know if he's there in the room or not, he's running a new business. So CSO is running a new business. So you see, so the role of the CSO, and I just want to end with this. This is where we are today. And this is where we are moving towards. And I just want to leave you all, those of you who are CSOs in the room, with a question about how is your role evolving and what do you need to do to keep up with that changing role? What are the skills you need to up? What's the domain knowledge and what are the thrive skills also that you need to serve your role that is changing very, very fast. If you think deeply and if you think about it, it is changing, and how do you cater to that? Yeah, thank you.